Welcome, everybody, to this special masterclass with Dr. Robert Floyd, the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, CTBTO. I'm Dave Cullen. I'm the Program Manager of Basics Emerging Voices Network, who's hosting this masterclass. To introduce Dr. Floyd, he prior to joining the CTBTO, he was Director General of the Australian Safeguards and Non-Proliferation Office from 2010 to 2021. He also chaired the advisory group to the Director General of the IAEA on safeguards implementation, co-chaired the preparatory committee for the review of the amended CPPNM, co-chaired one of the working groups of the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification, had various roles in the Australian government. He has a PhD in population ecology and spent the first 20 years of his career as a research scientist for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. Dr. Floyd will speak for about half an hour, and then we will have an opportunity for questions. If a question occurs to you while he's speaking, do feel free to put that in the chat. And you can also raise your hand, and we'll come to all the questions after he's spoken. So, Robert, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. It's great to be here with you all. And the Emerging Voices Network, what a great name. I don't know who came up with that, but there are so many different networks of younger people, next generation. It is just so good to see because the world needs you. And it's great to see you involved in this. I'm a little intimidated, though. You call this a masterclass. And I think, my goodness, you want me to deliver a masterclass? Well, I'm just another traveler like you on the way, on a journey and finding the way just like you do. But what I want to do is I'm going to tell you a bit about the CTBT, the CTBTO, and then at the end, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. And hopefully there's some things that I've learnt that might be helpful for you. And then when we go to Q&A, I'm happy that you dive into either area, whether it's about nuclear, a ban on the testing of nuclear weapons, or whether it's on a journey in science, in public diplomacy, in making a difference. The opportunity is yours. Take it where you wish. So just to start, I don't have to tell you that the world is currently a very complicated place. Multilateralism is facing real challenges, and who would have ever thought that that would happen? We need multilateralism for so many things which are so much bigger than a nation state. Non-proliferation and disarmament, is also under serious pressure, and as the NPT review conference in New York is grinding through the fourth and final week, states are finding it difficult to see where they land in common ground. We've had many different concerning areas of conflict around the world and some concerning statements made by different leaders in the area of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. But when I look back, is that we have overcome challenges in the past, and I do believe that we will overcome them in the future. But let me just take you back first to a little bit of history on the CTBT, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. It actually goes all the way back to 80 years ago. And, last year in August, I was in Japan, and it was for the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it was very confronting to me as I stood on a small hill overlooking the beautiful city of Nagasaki, lights twinkling as the sun disappeared and the darkness fell. A beautiful sight. And yet I knew that right below me on this little hill was the place where the bomb was meant to be dropped 80 years ago. If I was there 80 years ago, I would surely be dead. The bomb didn't drop right there because it was cloudy. The plane went further up the valley and dropped it 3.5 kilometers further up. But with that bomb and the one in Hiroshima, the greatest loss of human life, almost instantaneous, at the hands of other humans took place. Indiscriminate, devastating. But fortunately, after that event, the leaders of the world started to think about what could they do to make sure this kind of thing never happened again. Never to happen again. It was not an easy task. As different states were starting programs to try and discover how to design a nuclear weapon for themselves. And so from 1945 into the 1960s, it was largely words, but not moving far. And yet in 1962, an amazing crisis occurred. As many of you would know, 1962 was the Cuban Missile Crisis, a time when the nations of the world were staring into possible oblivion with nuclear war. Fortunately, nobody pressed those so-called red buttons, and we're all here today. But the world was in crisis, in huge anxiety. It's no surprise that then in 1963 that the Partial Test Ban Treaty came into being. Partial because they need to verify any commitment that states make. And they did not include underground testing in the partial test ban because the technology didn't exist at the time to be able to establish a verification system that would enable countries to be confident that no one is cheating, no one is conducting a test underground. And so there was this amazing hiatus of from the 1960s through to the 1990s, some 30 years, where science continued to advance and diplomacy was waiting for opportunity. Then in 1995, it all came together with the NPT Review Conference and Extension Conference, where it was agreed that the CTBT text should be completed and open for signature. 1 year later, that happened. And since then, what an amazing outcome. We have, before September of 1996, when the treaty was open for signature, we have, before that date, over 2,000 nuclear weapon tests taking place. 2,000. But since that date through to now, almost precisely 30 years, this is our 30th anniversary year for the treaty, less than a dozen tests. So we went from 2,000 to less than a dozen. That is incredible. That is amazing success. And such a powerful norm that now exists and a taboo almost on testing. And yet, as many of you would know, the CTBT has not entered into force. It is not legally binding. There is a group of now 9 states that need to ratify the treaty, that yet need to ratify the treaty so it can enter into force. It was 44 states, now only 9 remaining. But until that time, the treaty is not legally binding. But why has it been so successful, so powerfully successful in supporting the moratorium commitments of states and this norm against testing? And it's back to verification. I love it because it's back to science. And it's back to the partnership of science with diplomacy, which has allowed such an amazing advance with the CTBT. The science, our international monitoring system, is already well established. Over 90%, over 92%, and every percent counts, over 92% of the stations have been established, are operating. 4 different sorts of data. We collect seismic data to detect vibrations under the earth if there has been an explosion. We detect infrasound data and collect that for atmospheric tests, or hydroacoustic data for underwater tests in the oceans, and radionuclides in the atmosphere. And some of those radionuclides are telltale signs. They can only be formed if there has been a nuclear explosion. So all of that data collected by many of the countries of the world is then beamed by satellite into Vienna. And then when we put it all together, we then beam it back out to every state that is a signatory of our treaty. It's open, it's transparent, and the data is there to underpin the moratorium commitment of any state, that they would know that no one is cheating. A powerful example of how verification is so critical to establishing a global norm and shaping a different world. I'll go on to the challenge that we face at very low yield explosions in a moment. But the data that's collected in our international monitoring system is also used for other purposes. It's used for civil and scientific purposes, particularly in the area of natural disaster management, monitoring, response. Our data aids 21 countries, I think it is now, in their tsunami warning capabilities. There's about 100 stations of data is shared with those tsunami warning centres in different countries around the world, that they can use that to better predict a tsunami event and provide warning to their people. That data is used for earthquake monitoring, volcano monitoring, search and rescue, finding lost vessels. One of them, it also just shows how amazing the international monitoring system is. There was a submarine, an Argentinian submarine, and this was in 2017. It left port on a normal exercise deep down in the South Atlantic Ocean. It was cruising around there, and then there was radio silence. All was lost. There was great anxiety in Buenos Aires as to what had happened. Time was going by and oxygen was running out. Sadly, it was too late. But we then found, our experts found in our data, the evidence of a tiny little blip in our hydroacoustic data that may have been the evidence of an explosion that could have then been the fate of that submarine. We gave them a pin drop, a precise geographic location to go to, and said you might want to look here and see if that's where your submarine was, and is. They went there, and within 20 kilometres of this location in the vast South Atlantic Ocean, they actually found the remains of the imploded submarine. Now, I said imploded, not exploded. We're picking up pressure waves in the ocean. If you implode, you don't get much pressure waves, right? So the signal is very, very faint. And yet the two hydroacoustic stations that picked it up, they were about 5,000 kilometres away from where the submarine was, each of them. And yet the technology is so amazingly sensitive. The analytical capability is amazingly precise. Within 20 kilometres, we were able to say that's where the submarine was. Sadly, all submariners obviously died. At least it was able to bring closure to those that were near and dear, to those that were lost. But a sad story, but a story showing just how incredibly accurate and capable our systems are. Let me go to some recent commentary that is in the media, and many of you would be aware of this. We've had allegations being made by the United States of America that the People's Republic of China has been conducting nuclear explosive tests. This, they have backed up by giving a particular time and date and a location, and they're saying that seismic event is a nuclear test explosion. We have analysed our data, and when we look at it, we can see, yes, there absolutely is a small seismic event at that precise time that is being pointed to. But the seismic signal is so tiny that we cannot characterise it. And characterise means to determine whether it's a natural earthquake or whether it's a chemical explosion, or most importantly, is it a nuclear explosion? Too small to be able to do that. which is exactly what we would expect from our international monitoring system, because the international monitoring system, it was designed to pick up a nuclear weapon explosion from 1,000 kilotons or more. Sorry, I should say 1 kiloton or more, 1,000 tons of TNT equivalent. So to give you some idea of scale, is 1,000 tons of TNT sounds like a lot of TNT, a lot of chemical explosive, but the Hiroshima or the Nagasaki bomb, they were not at 1,000 tons. They were at 15 or maybe 21,000 tons, depending which of those two devices you're looking at. So this is only 2 to 3% of the size of those bombs that were used. And those bombs were only tiny ones compared to those that have been developed. But our international monitoring system actually does better than that. It's not at 1,000 tons of TNT. It's actually below that, down to only 500 tons. We can detect anything, anywhere. We wish we could do better, and we could in various ways. We could improve the technology. But the designers of the treaty knew full well that the challenge of banning any explosion from 0+ yield right through to infinity would require a range of different verification mechanisms. So the treaty has 3 other systems of verification, and they are specifically to deal with really low yield explosions. There are confidence building measures, mechanisms for consultation and clarification, and most importantly, on-site inspection, to be able to then use good technology to determine whether an explosion has taken place or not. Sadly, back to the issue, we do not have entry into force, and we can't use those 3 additional elements of our verification system. So there is a challenge where some are saying, what is the use of a CTBT that can't detect something near 0? Well, we could do something about that if we had entry into force. But let me say that the international monitoring system, in detecting anything from 500 tons of TNT right through to 1,000 or infinity, it is incredibly valuable because it creates that environment where any state knows that if they wish to test a nuclear weapon, they cannot do it in secret. It will be shown and evident to all. And if a state wants to develop a nuclear weapon for the first time, they will need to test. And they will need to test a device with a significant yield to be confident of using it. So this challenge to the treaty is not a bad thing. I think that this crisis of confidence actually opens opportunity for us to be able to build something which is bigger, better, greater. Enough on the CTBT and a world without nuclear tests. Let me share a few things on my own personal journey. And when I think about this crisis of confidence in the verification of the CTBT, 2 weeks ago, I was addressing a group of about 70 young people here in Vienna called the Nuclear Young Generation. They don't have a 35-year cutoff like you do. They have a 38-year-old cutoff. Don't ask me to justify why one says 35 and the other says 38 is the cutoff for what is young or young generation. I know for me, when I was 35, it was a major catharsis, because I was in the science agency in Australia as a research scientist, and there was an opportunity for early career scientists. And the head of my division came to me and said, Rob, you can't go to that. You're over 35. You're no longer early career. And I've got to say, that was like a midlife crisis for me, to be told you're no longer young, you're no longer early career. But I got over it. So good luck to you guys. I'm glad that you all still qualify. But back then, two weeks ago, Nuclear Young Generation, they asked lots of questions about my journey. One of the questions which I thought was most interesting is a person asked, do you regret ever taking on the role of the executive secretary of the CTBTO, given the difficulties that we're facing in the world today? I thought, wow, that's an interesting question. My answer was absolutely not. I have no regrets whatsoever because, in whatever humble way in my time in this job, we're going to make a difference. We're going to make this world a better place little by little. And to have any opportunity to do that to me is just incredibly motivating and exciting. But they were asking those kinds of questions. And I was telling them a little bit about my background is that when I was 12 years old, I said to my father, I want to be a research scientist. And I want to work in the CSIRO, which is the National Research Agency in Australia. My father said, well, you'll have to get a PhD and you might get a job. Well, I went to university, went straight through to a PhD and started with CSIRO on the next Monday. So I was really focused. I was somewhat precocious, I think, as a teenager in early 20s. But I had a dream and a vision, and I went for it. But what I want to tell you guys today is it's great to have a dream and a vision. That is really powerful and helpful. But whatever you do, do not let your dream or your vision limit you. And what I mean is that if somebody said to me when I was in my early 20s, one day you will lead a UN related agency seeking to protect the world from nuclear war, I would never have believed them. I would have think they're smoking something. And yet that's what's happened. So you hear me? I had a dream. I had a vision. I wanted to be a research scientist in the National Science Agency. But if I allowed that dream and vision to limit me, then there's so many places I wouldn't have gone. The other thing I would say to all of you is I had to learn to lean into opportunity. When opportunity comes, lean into it, lean towards it. Don't lean away. Don't back off, but see where it might take you. And it's been such an exciting journey. A transition out of the science agency into the heart of government in Australia, into the Prime Minister's department, all happened because of 9/11 and the anthrax attacks, the white powder incidents that were happening in the US and other places around the world back then in the early 90s, in the early 2000s. I was then asked to coordinate all science and tech in the National Science Agency for national security purposes. And then the Prime Minister's Department wanted to set up a unit to focus science, engineering and technology for counterterrorism for the whole country. And I was asked, would I consider making myself available to go there on loan for 2 years? And I thought about it for a nanosecond, leant into the opportunity and said yes. I'm so glad I did. At the end of 2 years, the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor came to me and said, Rob, you can't go, you must stay. And they created a senior executive position for me in the heart of government. And then for the following 5 years, I was coordinating everything to do with homeland and border security for the whole of Australia. My friends that knew that I did a PhD on cane toads were very worried that Australia would be a safer place with me doing that role. But yet again, don't let your view of yourself limit you. Another thing I learned is at many occasions along the way, and even when I was approached about thinking about this job, is that my view of me is probably the harshest critic there is. Because I know all of the things I struggle with and that I feel I can't do. And what I've had to learn is gather people around me that love me, that know me, and ask them what they think, whether they think I could do something or not. And I'd say to each of you is that if you think you can't, but the friends that love you think you can, I will back your friends as being more accurate than you almost any time. We need people that believe in us and can see us in actually a more objective way than we can even see ourselves. One final thing is that in my time as executive secretary in CTBTO, which is coming up to 5 years now, it's a fixed term. It can only be 8 years at the most. It's been an amazing privilege to actually be able to do something to leave this world in a better place, to hand on to the next generation, which is you. You know, of my generation, we are only temporary custodians as we pass it on to another. And one day you'll be doing the same. An amazing privilege, an amazing opportunity, amazing freedom to shape an organization and to contribute to a better world. For me, maybe for you, it's hard to find something that's more motivating than making a difference and making this world a better place. It came into sharp focus on the first day I took up office, and I'll finish with this. The first day, my wife and I moved to Vienna, and it was our eldest granddaughter's birthday. So we had a video chat with her before she went to bed, and we were getting up for my first day in the office of the head of the CTBTO. Becky was in the lounge room in a ballerina's dress, a tutu, and she was pirouetting around without a care in the world. And I was going to start my first day heading up the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And you know what that picture said to me? I want Becky to continue to live every day without a care in the world as to whether there would be nuclear war or not. And I want to do everything I can to make that her reality. Friends, passion is essential if you're going to be leaders. If you're leading and you have no passion and no optimism for what you're doing, my encouragement is resign. It's that essential. You, I'm sure, have desires and vision to change this world and leave it a better place from your contribution. May your passion be ignited and your optimism undiminished. And let's keep this journey going. Thank you all.